So I see people are trickling in. So I will kick it off from here already. Thanks for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good lunchtime to all the people who have joined thus far. Welcome to our CHA Out of the Box lunch series. So for those who will definitely or will actually have lunch while listening to our discussion, I wish you bon appetit. My name is Andrea Düchting. I'm working as a research associate at the Center for Humanitarian Action, and we will have a discussion today. We'll talk about different papers which have been recently launched by the Center for Humanitarian Action as well as ELRA, and hear from a couple of colleagues with their relevant experience when it comes to thriving humanitarian innovation. But before we dive into the discussion, I would like you to, familiarize you with a few housekeeping rules. In general, we would like to create an open space. So for that, we will have a 30 minutes input session, and then we'll follow by a second part with 30 minutes discussion. So for this, we would like to let you know that the session is being recorded, and we will share it with other speakers or with other listeners and interested people on our YouTube channel and the website of CHAR. While we have the first part of the webinar where we will have different inputs from colleagues, we would like to ask you to turn off the camera and your mics. For the discussion later on, if you don't want to, or if you're not being asked, kindly leave your camera and mics off, mainly for ease of facilitation. But when you would like to raise a question later on, show your face or use the digital hand and to speak up. We will also, Darina, my colleague, Darina Pelovska, who's on my screen, she's on top of me. She will monitor the chat. So please send any questions or comments in the chat. We will definitely have a discussion and welcome your input during the discussion session, second part of the webinar during the discussion. For those who would like to use the live transcription, the caption, you can access it via the menu bar. The webinar itself is in English, but we have Zoom live transcription available. And last but not least, if you have any technical issues or challenges, please send a message to our CHAR info technical support team. And just looking at my notes again, I think that's it. With that, I would like to kick off the discussion or give you a bit of an overview why we have invited you for this webinar, what we would like to talk about. And then in the next step, I would introduce you to our speakers. We have a very diverse group of speakers today, and we'll see if our third speaker is able to join us as well. The input on our paper might give us a bit of time for him to join the webinar as well. As mentioned, my name is Andrea. We have been working with Darina and colleagues. We have been working on an analysis lately and published a paper on identifying success factors for scaling humanitarian innovation. The project is kindly funded by the German Federal Foreign Office. And we have analyzed so to say success factors, or what does it take to actually successfully scale humanitarian innovation? And we have conducted a literature review. I looked at different use cases and spoken with different colleagues from different perspectives, and we have actually identified 10 factors of success. I won't dive into each and every single factor which is being presented here on the screen right now, but three main learnings from our research or analysis, which I'd like to share, which we'd also like to reflect for in today's discussion. One is that all these 10 factors, there was not one particular factor which stood out, which influences the success of innovation. It's rather an interplay and an interdependency between the different factors, and depending on the type of innovation, one factor might be more important than the other one, but it's definitely an interdependency and interplay between all the different factors. Then, secondly, we have also identified, realized from the colleagues we have spoken with, that success doesn't go without failure. So we will talk about failures in the second step in a minute, but it is important to acknowledge that there are disruptors. Humanitarian contexts are not going smoothly. There will be always challenges and barriers, and we can learn from failures, which are super important in different contexts, and to identify the specific problem statement. And then secondly, it's also not just about funding itself. It's also about engagement, collaboration. And I learned a term, I think yesterday, while listening to one of the HMPW recordings. I think during today's challenges and the so-called humanitarian reset, as Tom Fletcher has recently called it, we will have a lot of frenemies, so to say. So it's not just about competition with scarce resources, but also a lot of collaboration which needs to take place. And leadership is as important as commitment and working together. But when we move to the discussion, what we wanted to take this as an example, one is we have looked at success factors, and I will hand over to Spencer in a second to talk about Elra's paper on failures for humanitarian innovation. We mainly wanted to learn from the innovation space how to navigate the current state that we are in with the humanitarian system or the humanitarian development system, and what we can learn from a space which is inherently creative in nature, because it has to deal with creativity, with being innovative, with the buzzwords of being efficient, being effective, looking into how to reach, how to create impact. We wanted to create this space, open space, to discuss different experiences, which we can then use in order to all together shape a new humanitarian system and kick off a humanitarian reset. And with that, I would briefly like to introduce you high level or dedicated speakers. We have a broad expertise on the digital table today, and then I'm not sure if Alsanosi has been able to join us already. Look like so. From the left to the right, we have Spencer with us, and Spencer, you have to apologize if I'm not pronouncing your surname correctly. Huchulak, or maybe you can introduce yourself later. And again, Spencer is an innovation manager at Elra. For me, Elra is one of the key players when we talk about innovation or humanitarian innovation in our context. So he will bring a lot of experience to the table. They've conducted a lot of research and different types of analysis. Then to the right, we have Gbenga Sesan, who is the executive director of Paradigm Initiative. And I think we will learn a lot about your experience on digital inclusion, digital technologies, and all the different types of digital innovation in a humanitarian development context. And in theory, and hopefully soon in practice, we have also Alsanosi Adam from the Sudan Emergency Response Room, who is hopefully soon ready to share his experience from a localized perspective or localized innovation. So that's the panel we have today, and I will ask each panelist or speaker to reintroduce themselves. And with that, I would actually like to kick the discussion off. We have briefly talked about success, and I will turn it to Spencer first to learn from your research analysis experience of what are the main barriers and challenges when it comes to humanitarian innovation, and how to drive the different challenges which we are experiencing at the moment. Over to you, Spencer.
Thanks, Andrea. Hello, everyone. As Ryan mentioned, my name is Spencer Huchulak, and I'm an innovation manager at Elra. Elra is a global organization dedicated to solving complex humanitarian problems through both research and innovation. We work with humanitarian organizations, researchers, and the private sector to tackle the most pressing issues facing people worldwide. At Elra, we lead innovations, initiatives like the Humanitarian Innovation Fund, or HIF, funded by the FCDO, which has been supporting and scaling humanitarian innovation since 2011. Today, I'll be discussing the challenges and barriers faced by humanitarian innovators based on findings from our recent report, Failure to Scale. which is available online. This report highlights key challenges and recommendations that can improve innovation in the humanitarian sector. So there's a range of issues that were summarized following interviews with different innovators. Some of these are more widely known, like the lack of sufficient funding. So this was the need for greater amounts and different types of funding was the most frequent issue raised by practitioners in the interviews in this research. While many innovators receive initial support, there's a significant gap in long-term diverse funding that is necessary to scale successful innovations. The funding available is often fragmented, short-term, and doesn't match the complex needs of scaling and initiatives in the humanitarian space. Another issue is the fragmented collaboration. Humanitarian organizations tend to operate in silos, which limits innovators' ability to connect with the right partners and resources at the right time. This fragmented approach makes it difficult for innovations to scale effectively. Another widely researched issue is inflexible support structures. So many innovator support structures borrow from traditional humanitarian models, which can be rigid and slow to adapt. This makes it harder for innovators to adjust their solutions to meet local needs or to scale diverse environments. So these challenges are widely understood and widely discussed, but the report also highlights some emerging challenges which maybe need more attention. So one of these relates to the well-being of innovators. One of the key messages from the report is that high personal costs faced by innovators, including financial, mental, and physical health, as well as career opportunities, are often sometimes overlooked during the projects. Innovators are navigating a complex, high-pressure environment, and the personal toll can be significant. This challenge is often overlooked in traditional support structures, and without addressing it, we risk burnout and losing talented individuals from the innovation space. A final category relates to listening to local innovators. So the report finds that the sector also needs to focus on hearing the signals from those closest to the crisis. Historically, humanitarian innovation has been top-down, with decisions often made by global organizations that may not fully understand local context. The report underscores the importance of contextual innovation, ensuring that solutions are driven by local and national innovators that are best positioned to address the specific needs of their communities. So the report not only looks at some of these barriers and challenges, but provides a list of recommendations that the humanitarian sector can implement. We feel this report acts as quite a good health check on the sector and should be read by those that are learning how to improve grant management. So first recommendation is better engagement with local innovators. We need to build more effective mechanisms to hear and support local innovators who are closest to those affected by crisis. This means prioritizing local national networks and embedding innovation support at these levels. Another recommendation is multi-level collaboration. We need stronger collaboration across levels, local, national, and international. This ensures that innovations are dynamic and relevant, centered on the needs of those affected by crisis. We need tailored innovation funding. Funders should develop more agile funding mechanisms that are designed specifically for innovation. This includes ensuring that evidence requirements allow for iteration and support scaling efforts. Humanitarian organizations must create clear investment-focused pathways for deploying innovations. This will help ensure that innovators have the resources and independence needed for long-term sustainability. And finally, on that issue of innovator well-being, support systems must address the well-being of innovators. Providing long-term disaggregated services and helping innovators meet the full cost is essential for them to continue their work without experiencing burnout. So in conclusion, while we continue to address long-standing challenges like funding and collaboration, we must also start focusing on emerging issues like the well-being of the innovators in crises and the importance of listening to local innovators. By addressing these barriers, we can create a more inclusive and sustainable humanitarian innovation ecosystem. And at Aura, we're committed to supporting innovators at every stage in their journey. Together, we can scale solutions that improve the lives of those affected by crisis. Thank you.
Thanks, Spencer. So I personally, when I read your report, and we spoke about it yesterday as well, I think the issue of the well-being aspect of innovators hasn't been widely discussed in the in the context. So I think it's a very important point alongside the fragmented approach and the silos, the resource and funding constraints. With that, I would like to turn to you, Gbenga. I know that Paradigm Initiative has been working a lot on digital inclusion and humanitarian development contexts in both. So you're familiar with local disruptors, you're familiar with local context, contextual innovations, localized innovations. So from your experience, why do you think that failures are, or how can failures actually inform success? And what are your experience and with the failures which were just shared by Spencer? Do they reflect your experience? I mean, you're working across different countries in Africa, but maybe you can briefly explain the work of Paradigm Initiative as well for others who might not know the organization, and let us know what you feel like about innovation failures, how to learn from in order to succeed and be able to scale. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think Spencer already helped a lot with the example he gave. So thanks a lot, Spencer. My name is Gbenga, so I work with Paradigm Initiative as Executive Director. We are a Pan-African digital policy nonprofit. We work in digital inclusion. And we started doing that because of a personal experience that I had in terms of restrictions. I was denied access to a computer when I was in secondary school. And so I wanted to prove to my teacher that I could learn how to use computers. And that led to our training young people in Nigeria, which has now evolved into work that we do across the continent. And we were also working at the beginning, and we still do, with at-risk young people. In many of the countries where we work, for example, in DRC, and a few other countries, there are circumstances where what makes a difference between staying in a crisis situation and having a changed future is the opportunity that a young person gets through training and through mentorship. And of course, some of the risks that we have faced, either as an individual, myself, or my colleagues, have also led to the development of some of the tools that we have today. So you will hear us talk about Ayeta, which means bulletproof in my local language, Yoruba, as a digital security tool. That comes from my own experience of having restrictions either to get into some countries or devices being seized. And so how do I protect myself? And that led to us developing tools like that. So that's to explain why we do what we do at Paradigm Initiative. We we have offices in 6 African countries. If there's anyone who works in any of those countries, I'll be very interested in possible collaboration. Cameroon, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, even though our work from these offices are just as regional bases that lead into other areas of the continent. So that's a bit about Paradigm Initiative, not a bit actually. Let me speak within the next 3.5 minutes on maybe 3 or 4 things that are my own personal thoughts and some of the experiences that PIN has had in terms of failure and innovation. I actually just finished writing a book about the Paradigm Initiative story for the last 17 years. So a lot of the things I'm sharing today are things that I actually had to think a bit about and write in the book. And the first is that experimentation is important for success. And unfortunately, to be able to experiment, you can't be held down by the fear of failure. You need to have the ability to fail in a forgiving environment for you to eventually get to innovate and become successful. And I say this because of the context we work in. We work in many African countries where, as you're growing up, your parents are telling you that there's no room for failure, right? Like you are the hope for the family to become successful. And so anything that you do is with a lot of pressure. You're thinking, I'm going through school, I've started working, there's no room for experimentation. I have to succeed, because if I don't succeed, then my family is going to be disappointed in terms of, in fact, there is a joke that it takes a village to raise a child. So the entire village is disappointed that you have not suddenly become successful. And the challenge with that kind of pressure is that it doesn't allow you to fail forward, to try different things. When we started Paradigm Initiative in 2007, one of the things I decided to do was to experiment with various projects. But somewhere in the back of my mind at the very beginning was that we can't afford to fail. And because of that, there were projects that we continued to do that were not delivering, but because I was scared that if I stopped them, I would be accused of failing. Because of that, we carried dead weight of programs. And I think this is a risk that many organizations face, because you're scared of admitting that something has failed. You continue to implement it. And as you continue to implement it, you're wasting resources and you're not learning from the failure of that particular project or program. And the reason why I say that, that the ability to experiment is dependent on the exit of the fear of failure is because when you have that opportunity to be able to fail without thinking this is the end of everything, you can experiment a bit more. And I think it's literally the difference between children and adults. Children see a body of water and just want to jump in. An adult sees a body of water and is quick to remember the first time they almost drowned and they don't go close to the water. And they are very likely to tell the child, don't go in, don't go in, because the fear of failure becomes a crippling thing. That's one. The second is also that there is, and this is something that we've had to talk a lot about at Paradigm Initiative, what I refer to as conscious failures. Repeated conscious failures in a forgiving environment typically leads to success. And the reason I say that is because there is failure that comes from not doing the right thing, but there is failure that comes from you've done the right thing, you've done what you think is best, but things still go wrong. And you're conscious that I will learn from this. And so what we say within the team is that this is a learning moment. And I'm sure we all have, that kind of phrase popping up in our teams all the time, that this is a learning moment. This is something that you'll be scared of, oh my God, I could be fired for this. And your manager says to you, this is a learning moment. What happened? We hired a team member. This has been practical. We hired a team member in Malawi in, I think, 2016. And, we will have team meetings. This person wouldn't show up. And the recruiting manager was feeling bad. Did I do the wrong thing? Is this a recruitment error and things like that? But the reality is that even before COVID, the whole idea of remote work was something we understood at Payne, such that when COVID hit, we were able to transition and continue to work because we had learned from the failure 3 years ago of how it is possible. The manager is in Nigeria, the team member is in Malawi. There is almost no way for you to know if this person is working or not, but then you build systems, calendars, smart sheets, and the lessons from that failure is what prepared us for COVID times when we were then able to do some work. So conscious failures in a forgiving environment, if it's repeated over time, of course, leads to success. One other example, and I did mention this when we had a chat yesterday, is that many of the projects that Payne is able to implement today at much less of a cost than what others would do is from our original financial failure. So at the very beginning, we had a major financial failure. We didn't have resources, and it meant that we had to be nimble, we had to be light on our feet, and that way we were able to implement projects without too much cost. And so when our budget grew from a few hundred to say $1 million, we were still able to do more based on the failure that we had learned from in terms of financial resources. I want to stop here because I know this is supposed to be about 5 minutes. But the three things that shine through in what I've said: one is consciousness, the other is follow through. It has to be repeated conscious failures. It's not one mistake that you run away from. And of course, something that you must have noticed is documentation. You must document everything. The Paradigm Initiative story, you started a work in progress. The book will be presented on May 1. And all through the book, one thing you will find is that I'm able to tell stories of what happened in 2016, May 11, at 4 p.m. simply because of documentation. We know when we failed, and we know when that failure was repeated and became a bit of a success. And I think that is really important. We must be conscious, we must follow through, and we must continually document to learn from past errors. Thank you.
Well, thanks. That's well, I've taken notes, and I think what you've said a couple of times is a forgiving environment as well. So let's see what other experiences we will hear from. And I'm happy to see that Alsanosi was able to join us as well, right in time for input. And welcome to our round of discussion. And before raising the question to you, Alsanosi, I would also like to ask you to briefly introduce yourself, and maybe when you introduce yourself, we have talked, as you know, Spencer referred to different challenges and barriers when it comes to scaling humanitarian innovation. Gbenga was just providing, and you were able to listen to a couple of examples why it's so important to fail in order to succeed. And from your experience working at the Sudan emergency response rooms, it would be super interesting to learn as well how you experience it from a local perspective or in terms of localized innovations. Are there any trade-offs when it comes to scaling at reach, looking at impact in a humanitarian context? So what is your experience when it comes to looking at failures and successes in humanitarian innovation? Over to you, Alsanosi.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Alsanosi Adam. I'm the External Communication Coordinator for the Emergency Response Rooms of Sudan, a member of the Localization Coordination Council in Sudan. I hope my voice is loud enough. So I think, when it comes to, innovation within the local environment, I think the main issue here is about how could we find out, from the communities, some sort of knowledge that could be reproduced, then scaled. In our model within, in mutual aid and in Sudan, it was the concept of Nafir. And Nafir is a concept whereby, Sudan, it's a massive agricultural land, and I think back our ancestors back in the days, they kind of come together to help one another, either cultivate or harvest their crops. Then this same concept took a transformation to being, we come together to respond for disaster management. If there is fire, if there is a flood, and so on and so forth. So it's like a cohesion, a community effort, community-led designed effort to do something. And that's what we use and adopted in our modality within the emergency response rooms. The units on the ground, they come together, organize themselves according to merit, according to experience, according to capacity, and then they together design interventions for their communities, right? So they would have at the beginning it was just the unit and nothing has been defined. Then the more the work they do, the more they realize that, actually we need to organize this better. We need to structure this better. How about we divide and conquer? How about we divide between thinkers, legislators, and technical officers. So how can we do that? How can we elect people to represent us and at the same time appoint people to do the work that we do? So, and it goes on and it goes, and every meeting, it's about learning from what is being done, what's the good that's been done to be replicated and shared across with other units. And what is, what didn't work here that we could also share it with others so that they can start fresh or maybe look into it and try to kind of use it to their contents. So because Sudan is a massive land with different cultures and different, sometimes you will try an approach in an area, but doesn't work, but in another area it will work. So connecting all these units together to kind of learn from each other's experience and adapt and reproduce that knowledge that works and share it with everyone. That's how we've been kind of advancing with this approach across the years. So it's not a breaking ground kind of concept. It's an old concept that has been, harvested from the communities, and then it's been used now as being kind of updated and developed so that it can go on and go forth. Yeah.
Thanks. I heard, you were reflecting on a few aspects which we also had as success factors mentioned earlier on: collaboration, learning. I heard listening as well, which Spencer already mentioned as one of the issues early on. So for the second round of quick, well, I will ask the same question to all the three of you, and I would like to ask you to pick up maybe 2 key points before we open up the floor to the participants. So when you think of the learnings in your day-to-day business innovation context, we are at the stage of humanitarian reset, as Tom Fletcher called it recently. So what are the learnings which we can take into action now to inform and navigate this humanitarian reset? So what are your 2 main criteria which you, from your background and learnings, would like to see being taken into action to inform the new setup of the humanitarian development system? Maybe Spencer, over to you first, Gbenga, Alsanosi, and then we will open up the floor.
Okay, thanks, Vidra. Thanks for the question. I think I will, the most recent work I've been involved with was ELRA's High Severity Adoption Challenge, which provided insights from multiple contexts, multiple sectors of adopting innovations from one context to another. I can just bring up two key learnings following the completion of those projects. So one of the major learnings was the importance of adoption. So not just during the early stages of innovation, but throughout the whole process, especially with the target of scale. So in our projects, we found that grantees, whether it was adjusting their training programs due to security concerns or translating materials for cultural relevance, the need for dedicated time and resources for adaptation was critical. Yet this is sometimes overlooked in funding cycles and structures, which typically focus on innovation scaling. So that's an important recommendation and change that we've seen. Another related issue is the importance of flexibility and contingency planning, lessons that were vital to our innovators. So for instance, one grantee that was working with a smaller logistics company when they were facing shipping challenges. So with the urgency of deadlines, this enabled them to demonstrate kind of an adaptive and well-planned response that kind of overcame the obstacles and allowed the project to be a success. So these are some of the findings from our most recent grantees that we'll be hopefully publishing at a later date this year.
I can already see kind of as we say in German, the red thread. There's adaptation. We have already heard it early on as well, and flexibility and learning. It sounds like there are terms and experiences which are being reflected throughout the discussion. So Gbenga, what are your 2 takes for informing the reset?
Thanks. I think reset is a powerful word. And it's conscious, and I'm pretty conscious about consciousness. Excuse me. So two things for me. One is the need to build and review with and not for the community we're working with. And I say this because in times of crisis, if what we have built in terms of innovation is something we've built for a community, then it is not the easiest thing in the world to then have a conversation about scaling it down. A practical example is when we started training in a particular community and they were used to a certain level of quality, rooms with ACs, everyone on a computer. And when there was a financial challenge, because we had built with the community, they were actually willing, and this is very interesting, people who didn't have computers were then willing to make photocopies of keyboards to learn. And I can imagine that it sounded weird to us. Why would you be willing to learn how to use a computer with the photocopy of a keyboard? But because as far as they were concerned, this was their thing. It wasn't something that we brought to the community. It was a need they had, and it was something that we built together. At another time, there was a physical crisis in a community, and the building was being attacked. And the vigilante groups in the area came to my office, locked me in the office, locked our team members in, locked the gate, and protected the building. And when I asked them, because I had no idea what was going on, I was really confused and scared. And then after everything died down, they came to me and said, well, we locked you in. And I said, why did you do that? They said, well, if anything happens to you, our children will no longer get access to training. So we thought the most important thing was to protect you and then to try to protect the building, because if we lose the building, you are still alive, then, well, maybe you can build something else to train our children. So I think building with, communities is really important. The second for me would be openness to alternatives. And I sort of hinted on this earlier, because I think there's a tunnel vision that comes with resources and investment approaches that makes you think the only way to do this is in a certain way. We were convinced that the only way to train was to get these kids into a comfortable environment to paint a picture of the future for them. But the alternative of working with what they had, which was limited resources, was something that we were open to. And being open to that alternative prevented a situation where we had, this tunnel vision. It must be this way or no other way. Remember, during COVID, the first questions that many of us asked about the physical training we were doing was, oh my God, how are we going to do this? How are we going to reach people? But, from reaching communities, those who had internet access, reaching them online, and to also being able to reach communities that were already opening up, bit by bit, through sort of a hybrid model where the leaders in each of the communities can join virtually, but they are still in a room physically, just 20 of them with other people. And that was, how we were able to navigate that challenging environment.
Great, thanks a lot. I mean, we have adaptation, flexibility, and planning, which I would link to openness to alternatives as well, being flexible in other terms, or in other words, and community-led building with the people. Alsanosi, what are your two key takes for informing the reset?
To start with thinking about this, when it comes to reset in the humanitarian and innovation sense, usually, systems within this industry are built, for different times. They're pretty old, and a little bit rigid and hard to bend when it comes to, especially in the humanitarian industry. New ideas and innovation is often met with skepticism and maybe even fear. It could be fear of failure, fear of risk, fear of, even the level of the knowledge of local communities on doing a certain thing. So, the main thing for me is behavior change. when it comes to, and that's a general way of looking at it, of saying it within the industry. You need to change the behaviors on how to deal with grassroots, local community, new ideas in terms of delivering humanitarian aid. And that, yes, and let's be honest, that also bring us to think about ourselves, our own motives and agendas, and our own, livelihood as international community, our international NGOs. But that doesn't mean there is no plug-in between the industry, the way it was set up and the way it was operating and doing business back in the days, and these new emerging ideas and innovative ideas. So changing behavior is the number one thing. And the second thing, it's always flipping the arrows. Instead of ideas and design comes from up, down, to co-design. So this concept of co-design is being used by some of the organizations who are a little bit progressive in their thinking and kind of trying to move this thing further. But it's a big no-no for most of the organizations, to my experience, in the global south. I mean, maybe let me just say in Africa. Bringing up ready solutions to environments that are often everything you will bring, sometimes do you think as a solution, it might be a hurdle to create a problem. So when we reverse that and have the people on the ground do the designing, and then there's always a lot of great plugins, from an interactions perspective. You can pilot things, and then when they work, good. When they didn't work, then I think there's a lot of great minds that they could look into this and think, okay, what went wrong and how can we make it work better? So in a nutshell, behavior and co-designing with local communities.
Thanks a lot. And I like the way you all, for me, you all said the same in different terms and in different terminologies. One called it flexibility, the other one called it openness. And the building with community, you call it co-design. But it sounds like not in silo and not alone and not top down. So it sounds like the main key takeaway from the panelists, from the speakers at the moment, is that we need to shape it all together. With that, all together is the wording. I'm looking at Darina for opening up the floor. We are a bit behind the time, but I hope that there are some interesting questions or comments with sharing experience. Over to you, Darina.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrea. I actually monitored the chat very closely. And well, as we are here in not a webinar, but a meeting Zoom function, you can also raise your hands to address the panelists directly and maybe share some of your experiences on what was helpful in your own innovation scaling journey. But while you're thinking about raising your hands and getting ready to be unmuted, I can share some thoughts from chat. Actually, Marina Peter, she shared that, this right to fail as a basis to grow was really resonating with her. I wonder whether this might be the same with some of our other participants. So that could be your opportunity to share of your experiences with the right to fail. And then I've got two questions, one from Gernot Ritthaler to Gbenga. He would like some more practical examples about the successful innovation, like how did the journey went for you? What actually made your innovation an innovation? That's a little bit of a terminology question here. And again, maybe some more thoughts other than the ones that we established strongly here already. What else made it successful? And second question I have from Rowan Wilkinson from Chatham House to actually all of your panelists. So he would like to know, how do you actually community and build in the failure or the culture of failure in your proposals for the increasingly risk-averse funders? So how to establish this culture or notion? And the second question of Rowan would be, how do you think is the role of open source technologies in scaling humanitarian digitalization? What is the role of that in the humanitarian scaling environment? And that's all I have for the moment. And with that, back to you, Andrea.
Thanks. Maybe we can turn it directly to Gbenga to, maybe you can provide a practical example for success, and then a second one on how to fail in a context where there is actually risk notion with funders involved.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Gennard. This practical example, so it cuts across two different areas. One is, and I'm sure we've all talked about, conditional cash transfers and payment systems. In some work that we did at some point, we realized that we were studying digital use in conditional cash transfers, and we realized that there were scenarios where a lot of women did not prefer the option of digital transfers, right? And that lesson was learned, of course, from feedback and trying to build with people. And the interesting thing was that no one really thought of why until we found out, you had these closed sessions and some of the women were open enough to say, listen, when you do digital transfers, it's going to a mobile phone. And in this household, the mobile phone is with a man. And so it is in fact, in one of those cases, once the payment is made, the text message is deleted and only one person knows that the cash had been transferred. But let me speak specifically to a particular innovation that I thought was very successful. So this was a scenario where there was terrorism, there was support in terms of humanitarian support, and communication was expensive because the only thing you could do was to pick up a mobile phone and call someone, and then you can get the services. But there was a new method that was being used. People will then leave only maybe 5 naira, the smallest amount of money on their phones, so they can give someone a missed call. So basically you call the person, and you have to be an expert, right? Because before they pick, you have to cut it, otherwise you will lose the money. And this missed call then became a successful innovation because it then became a process where you could actually, when you make the call, no one picks up because they know that this is a missed call that you're trying to do. And that then triggers a phone call that comes back to you. It sounds like it's very simple, but the fact that people know that they can dial and no one is going to pick the call and they're not going to lose money was very useful, and it was very helpful. And I think the two key things that helped in terms of making this innovation successful, number one was really listening to the lived experience. So many times, I'm an engineer by training and I build things for people. and because of that, I'm tempted to think, oh, this is a process flow, this is how it works, this is a use case, but there is no great use case without lived experience. And that was, I think, a major lesson for us, that people were using the missed call for something we never thought would happen. No telecom company at the time thought that anyone will do that. So that's one ingredient. And the other ingredient is also being able to consciously take that lesson and go back to the beginning of the process and build that in. And maybe I can speak very quickly to failure with risk-adverse funders. I'll say what we did practically. So what we did practically was that even though we were experimenting, we made sure that we had a scenario where when we were reporting to those funders, we were reporting the progress and success, not the failures. And so we built the failures into our, so 10% of the cost was for indirect cost. And what we had determined was that if this did not succeed, we were going to bill it into the 10% that we didn't have to report on specifically. And that was very helpful because in most cases, when it doesn't become successful, we bill it into the 10%, and the funders don't mind. I mean, because all they want is what you spent our money on was successful. But what I think was also very useful was that in our final report, we always communicated the lessons from failures that they did not pay for. So we failed, we bore the costs, but you are getting the credit. And in 2 or 3 cases, the next time we're having a conversation about funding, they are willing to sort of be a bit more experimental. But to be honest, there were funders who were not forgiven and were not interested in you failing or learning. I mean, there's 1 in 3, and you know, for that you will have to keep reporting the success and not, you know, communicate what could lead to a termination of that project.
Thanks, Gbenga. And I will actually park the open source question, or maybe you can answer it in the chat. I'm pretty sure you will be able to respond to Ronan about this question, but maybe quickly to Spencer and Alsanosi. So Spencer, maybe with regard to your experience of the Humanitarian Innovation Fund, I know it's not a risk-adverse funder per se, but maybe you can share an experience how you deal with building in, or how you handle failures in the proposals with you receive for the Humanitarian Innovation Fund.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So most of my work focuses on the innovation side of Elra's work. We fund mostly nonprofits to conduct innovations overseas. And I would say that one of the strengths of the Humanitarian Innovation Fund is that the funding we receive from FCDO includes funding for learning journeys. So in all of the adoption challenges from last year, there was a partnership with an external university that conducts research on their work. So we had a nutrition project that is going to be publishing its findings. We had a mental health project as well, menstrual hygiene project. Each of these innovations, whether they're success or failure, or have successes and failures within their projects, are being evaluated from a third party. So this allows us to say what are the challenges, but more independently than the organization self-reporting and us broadcasting those, we will have kind of independent monitoring. So I think Elra's model of a combination of innovation and research is a great model for other organizations to implement, but it does require that funding allows for that research to be paired, and ideally through a third party, so that it has a bit more rigor, and the research methodology can be used for future research or for baselining and for comparison in the future. So I think those are some of the things that we're finding with our projects, and we want to strengthen as we identify the challenges and failures of scale. Thank you.
Great. I think third-party aspect, it's, yeah, I have heard it a couple of times in different contexts, also in the digital sphere. I've heard it a lot. You are actually, Alsanosi, you have been saved from this question, because there's a direct question to you, which I would like to use to also start wrapping up the discussion. So quickly for you, Alsanosi, if there's a question from Ruben, if you think that the grassroots efforts, such as mutual aid and practiced by the emergency response rooms, are scalable, or do they risk losing their own effective way of addressing needs? Any experience from you on that one?
Yeah, you know, when we started the second week of the war, we started in one neighborhood with one emergency response rooms that does communal kitchen and a safe children-friendly spaces. Right now, we scaled to across Sudan. We have 18 states, so we work in 16 states of those, over 700 emergency response rooms, over 13,000 volunteers across the country. So it is scalable, very, you know, much. And if you can scale within an environment like Sudan, you can scale pretty much everywhere else. So yes, Ruben, it is very scalable, and it does not lose the effectiveness. It's rather creates more cohesion, and there is more experiences to learn from. So, you know, the experience in Darfur is different than experience in Sinar, and the experience in Khartoum is totally different than experience in Kordofans. So, but we share these experiences together and we learn from them. Until we've created the Localization Coordination Council that doesn't just have emergency response rooms, but also has 16 local organizations from inside the country. It has 6 organizations who are international organizations who are observers. So it's scalable, and I think you know, in places like Congo or South Sudan, and I think it might be a lot easier, minimizes risk on expats and put more of the designing and the implementation on the people on the ground. And it's also you know, what's the word, efficient, and yeah, the cost is not that much. So yeah, I think we have built a model that is, and we've proved that it is scalable. And in our strategy, I think we see the potential of actually scaling similar structures across the continent. I am really thank you for that, and I really have to go right now. I have another. It happened like that. It's booked back to back on the top of the hour, and I'm reachable, available. You can share my contacts for any discussions or any further communications and questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, my colleague Spencer and Gbenga, Andrea, and Dariana for this, and yeah, we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and I will share the words of thanks with everyone as well. I think I would like to share my gratitude to all the speakers, the chart team, the listeners, the participants, for allowing me to listen. That's what we learned today. Learning from you all, from your experience. And I think one other takeaway is another L, it's the localized innovation. I think we have been hearing from you all actually how important it is to build with people and not top down on their behalf, co-designing innovation in order to allow it to scale. With a last word and a big thanks to everyone. If you have another minute to spare, we would be very happy if you can fill in our webinar or our meeting event survey for us to learn and listen to you as well. And there will be another survey coming up as part of this innovation project, which will be particularly looking at AI. We will share the link in the recording notes, which we will be sharing in a moment. With that, on top of the hour, I would like to thank everyone. Have a good rest of the day, and really grateful for this super interesting discussion and insights which have been shared by all of you. Big clap and thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.